Chapter 1: The Condemned. Rain fell like grief from the heavens. I knelt in the center of the execution square, stone cold beneath my knees, blood warmer than it should have been on my back. My hands were bound behind me, too tight for comfort, too loose to forget they existed. Crimson bloomed through the white of my robes, some from the whipping, some from the fall, and some, I think, from the parts of me that had simply stopped wanting to live. A crowd had gathered, thousands, by the sound of the silence, all of them afraid to speak, afraid to look too long. But I heard the murmurs anyway. Is that him? The fourth prince? They say he plotted treason. Treason. I almost laughed. I didn't even know what rebellion meant until the day they dragged me into the throne room. I hadn't led a coup. I hadn't called for blood. All I did was trust someone I loved. Jihang. I remember the warmth of his hand on mine, the way his voice lowered when he recited poetry, the way he touched me like I mattered, like I was more than the emperor's overlooked fourth son. He had told me I was too gentle for this place, and then he handed my name to the court like it was just another poem he didn't finish. My head hung low, strands of soaked hair clinging to my cheeks. My jaw throbbed, my vision blurred from the rain, or maybe from the blow that split my lip. It didn't matter. Pain had long since become part of me. I didn't cry. That part was over. I had begged already days ago, weeks ago, screamed that I was innocent, pleaded with the ministers, with the emperor, with my brothers. No one listened. No one ever had. The Grand Chancellor stepped forward, scroll in hand. His voice echoed like thunder through the square. Prince Li Wei, fourth son of His Majesty the Emperor, you are hereby sentenced to death for treason against the Empire. Gasped. A collective breath held and broken. But no protest, no defense. Not from my father. Not from my brothers. Not even from the ones who once called me friend. I bowed my head. If this was the end, then let it come. I would not give them the satisfaction of watching me beg again. Chapter 2: The Prince of Petals. The palace gardens were my only refuge. When the walls of the court closed in, when the whispers slithered too loud to bear, I disappeared into a maze of plum blossoms, moon bridges, and koi ponds. Among petals and stillness, I could finally breathe. I was 17 then, slender, pale, quiet, the kind of prince poets praised for beauty, not valor. I wrote verses in the margins of government reports. I bled emotion into calligraphy. I watched butterflies instead of weapons. They thought I was soft. They were wrong. But softness in a place like this was mistaken for weakness. And weakness invited cruelty. My older brothers made sport of it. Still hiding behind flowers? Do you plan to seduce your way to power? Li Jian scoffed once, catching me with a brush in hand. I bowed my head. I always did. There was no victory in responding. Li Jian was the golden sun, muscle, charm, arrogance. Everything the court adored. I was the son of a forgotten concubine, a name barely spoken since her ashes were sealed. To them, I was a decoration. But decorations see everything. I watched who arrived late to meetings, who flinched at the emperor's gaze, who walked too quietly in the shadows. I learned the palace not with a sword, but with silence. Sometimes I wondered if I was born in the wrong skin, if I would have been better as a scribe, a monk, a painter, someone who could live without pretending. But I had been born a prince, and princes don't get to dream, so I smiled. I wrote poems. I memorized every stone in the garden paths. I learned how to vanish in plain sight, and all the while I waited, not for power, but for someone to see me and not turn away. Chapter 3: The Whispered Flame. His voice was the first spark. I didn't know it at the time, but that quiet recital in the Imperial Library was where my story truly began to unravel. The chamber was stifling, full of nobles eager to outverse one another, every poem dripping with ego or flattery. And then came Jihang. He stood at the center with nothing in his hands. No scroll, no fan, no pretense. He recited a poem I knew by heart, one buried deep in the archives. No applause followed. No one understood it, except me. I met his gaze across the room, His mouth lifted in a knowing curve. Later that night, I found myself wandering near the koi pond, restless and unsure why. I heard footsteps, but I didn't turn. I already knew it was him. "You caught the reference, most people wouldn't," he said. I tilted my head, surprised. "Most people don't read that far back." "I do. And I noticed you do too." It was the first time someone spoke to me not as a prince, but as a person. After that, everything unfolded slowly, like ink bleeding across parchment. A smile here, a lingering glance there. He was confident but never forceful. Gentle in a way I'd never experienced. He listened. Gods, he listened. To my fears. To my dreams. To the poems I never showed anyone. He called me rare. Said I moved like still water. Too soft for this world. One night, beneath a silk canopy in the garden pavilion, he took my hand. "You're like moonlight, too gentle for a palace built on steel," he whispered. My breath caught. I told him he didn't need to say things like that. "I say them because they're true." His lips brushed mine, soft, trembling. In that moment, I forgot what it meant to be cautious. I forgot that the court had teeth. He made me feel seen. So when he asked about the guards, I told him. Just a little. When he wondered aloud about which ministers were close to the emperor, I didn't see the danger. I saw a man who believed the system was broken. A man who wanted change. I believed him. What I didn't know, what I refused to see, was that each word I gave him was another brick in the scaffold they would build for me. He wasn't courting a prince. He was shaping a witness. And I, naive, lonely, desperate to be understood, was walking straight into the trap. Eyes open. Heart first. Chapter 4. The Blade Beneath Silk. It happened like lightning. One moment I was in my chambers, drinking morning tea. The next, I was standing in the emperor's court, surrounded by screaming ministers and unreadable faces. I hadn't even brushed my hair. "There was a coup," one of my servants whispered as he handed me my outer robe. "The Duke of Yan's estate is in flames. 3 ministers are dead." By the time I arrived at the throne room, the chaos had solidified into something worse. Silence. That sharp, breathless kind of stillness before a blade comes down. The emperor sat on the dais like a statue carved from fury. Beside him stood the Grand Chancellor, who looked far too calm. "There he is, the traitor, the 4th prince." The Chancellor barked, pointing directly at me. My heart stopped. "What?" The guards moved before I did. Hands grabbed my arms. Cold iron gripped my wrists. I struggled. Breath caught halfway up my throat. I don't understand. What is happening?" But no one answered. The Chancellor held up a scroll. My scroll. "Found in the quarters of the rebel commander, written to Ji Hung," he said. Then came another. And another. Letters. Notes. Seals in my name. Dozens of them, all pointing to one thing. That I had shared court secrets with a traitor. "No," I whispered. "No, this isn't." And then he spoke. Ji Hung. He stepped forward from the shadows, calm as a ghost. I tried to stop him. I begged him to see reason. He said. He looked at me like I was something tragic. "I trusted you, but you rebelled." I shouted, the words tearing out of me. His voice lowered, full of false grief. "It was you who wanted me to rebel. You command it. I thought I could talk you out of it. But I couldn't. I wanted to lunge at him, to tear him apart with my hands. But I couldn't move." The emperor rose. "Enough, the evidence is clear," he said. "It's not. This is a lie. He's lying," I cried. But no one listened. Not my father. Not my brothers. Not the court that once ignored me. "Take him," the emperor said. And just like that, the world I knew collapsed. The guards dragged me from the room. My feet barely touched the ground. Voices echoed around me. Whispers of betrayal, scandal, shame. And in that moment I didn't weep. Not when they bound me in chains. Not when they stripped me of my title. But when the door slammed shut. When the light vanished behind cold stone. I let my knees hit the floor. And I wept for everything I had been too blind to see. I had dreamed of poetry. Instead, I became a cautionary tale. Chapter 5. The Sword Returns. They led me to the execution square at first light. Dawn hadn't broken, it bled. The sky was a wash of bruised violet and steel, thunderclouds curling above like clenched fists. Rain slicked the stone beneath my knees. Cold. Filthy. My blood had long since soaked into my robes. Hot when it spilled, chilled now by the wind. I didn't beg. I didn't pray. My lips were too cracked to speak. My voice long since swallowed by the silence of this empire. The crowd was a wall of breathless ghosts. No faces, just silhouettes. Observers too afraid to look directly, too hungry not to watch. I felt their judgment like needles between my shoulder blades. This was how they'd write me into the margins of history. Prince Li Wei, the soft one, the foolish one, seduced into treason, executed before his poetry could stain the throne. Let them write it. I closed my eyes. Let it end. Then hooves. A sound that did not belong. At first, distant. Then louder. Closer. Urgent. Thunder rolled not in the sky, but on the ground. The palace gates slammed open with a metallic cry. A black horse burst into the square, its rider cloaked in armor scorched by battle and rain. He didn't slow. Didn't hesitate. He vaulted from the saddle mid-gallop, landing on the execution platform like a blade thrown by the gods. Gasps cracked through the crowd. Legion. My brother. He was soaked, furious, alive with purpose. His cloak hung heavy with water, but his movements were precise, brutal. His hand hovered over his sword hilt. Not uncertain, but ready. For a heartbeat, I thought I was hallucinating. Li. Zhen. I croaked. He saw me, and something inside him snapped. His eyes went wild. Touch him, and I'll gut the next man who moves. He growled, voice like storm against steel. The executioner froze mid-step. The guards faltered. Even the ministers, those polished shadows in the corners of the court, stiffened. Li Zhen mounted the platform in 3 strides. He didn't unsheath his blade. He didn't need to. He dropped to his knees before the emperor, armor clanking, hair plastered to his face. My life, take it if you must, but look deeper. If he is guilty, then kill me too. He said, voice low, hoarse. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The brother who had never once spoken for me, who had always stayed just out of reach, was now offering his life for mine. The emperor rose, slow as stone eroding in the rain. You defy my will? I defy a lie. I defy the rot in your court. The venom of traitors. Li Zhen replied. You would wager your life on his innocence? I already have. Silence cracked like a whip. Then movement. The Grand Chancellor stepped forward, whispering into the emperor's ear. Words I couldn't hear, but knew too well. Poison disguised as counsel. The emperor turned his gaze on me. Cold. Calculating. Like a butcher deciding where to cut. It is done, let the blade fall, he said. The executioner raised his sword. Li Zhen surged forward with a roar. But too late. Guards seized him, dragged him back, his boots scraping against the wet stone. Our eyes locked, and I saw it, all of it. Rage. Helplessness. The pain of a man who had arrived moments too late to undo the world. I mouthed the only words I had left. Thank you. And then the sword came down. Darkness swallowed me. Not death, but something worse. A silence deeper than any grave. A falling without end. The death of everything I had once been. And the beginning of what I would become. Chapter 6. The Second Life. I woke, gasping. Air tore into my lungs like a blade. My chest burned. My limbs trembled. It felt like surfacing from a nightmare that had drowned me. Sweat slicked my skin. But the scent in the air wasn't blood. It was sandalwood. Soft. Clean. Familiar. No smoke. No iron. No rot. I bolted upright. Curtains swayed gently around my bed. Blue silk embroidered with white cranes in mid-flight. The floor beneath me gleamed. My desk sat untouched. The inkstones were clean. My mirror caught the morning light. Everything was as it had been. Except me. I stumbled from the bed, legs weak. Reached for the mirror like it might vanish if I blinked. And there, staring back, was a version of myself I thought had died. Younger, whole, eyes wide, not hollow. No chains on my wrists, no scars on my back, no dried blood on my robes. It was me, before the blade. Before Ji-hung whispered promises and built my ruin from kisses. Before the trial, the betrayal, the execution square. I fell to my knees, breath heaving. It wasn't a dream. Somehow, impossibly, I was back. Not days, not hours. A year. A full year before everything shattered. Back in the skin of the boy they thought would break. A strangled laugh tore from my throat. Raw and disbelieving. Then came the sob. My forehead pressed to the polished wood floor. Tears stung my eyes. Not grief, not fear. Gratitude. Thank you, I whispered, voice shaking. Not to the gods, not to fate, but to whatever had bent the threads of time and stitched me back into this moment. Thank you, because this time I wouldn't beg. This time I wouldn't mistake softness for safety. This time I wouldn't let my heart blind me to the teeth behind the smile. I stood, slowly, hands trembling, but there was steel in my spine. The court hadn't changed yet. The knives hadn't been drawn. Ji-hung hadn't begun his seduction. But I knew what was coming. I knew where the shadows moved. I knew the whispers before they were spoken. I knew which smiles hid blades. The palace had never been safe. But now I wasn't the boy they remembered. I had died. I had returned. And this time, I would rewrite the ending. Chapter 7, The Silent Sword. I didn't go to the gardens that day. I went to the barracks. The clatter of swords rang down the palace corridors. Sharp, steady, relentless. Not music, not chaos, just truth in metal. Once, I would have flinched at it, turned away, buried my ears in poems and petals. But that was before. Before betrayal smelled like perfume. Before silence became a weapon. Now the sound called to me like a drumbeat, like an omen, like home. The first prince trained there at dusk. Legion. He was the kind of legend people whispered about, even within the family. A man cut from war itself, steel wrapped in silence. A blade too honed to speak without need. Not cruel, not cold, just sharpened to the point of solitude. I remembered him from childhood. Distant, immovable, a shadow carved into the palace walls. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't raise his hand. But somehow he raised expectations just by existing. In another life he returned too late. Just late enough to stop the blade, but not the judgment. By then, my fate had already been signed in blood and sealed in silence. But not this time. In this life he was early, and I needed him to see me before the shadows swallowed me whole again. I waited behind one of the carved stone pillars that lined the outer Barak hall, silent, composed, heart ticking like a snare drum. The air smelled of sweat, oil, and the faint tang of iron. Soldiers passed like ghosts, heads down, eyes forward. They knew better than to linger where the first prince walked. And then he appeared. No fanfare, no escort, just presence. He moved like something inevitable, straight-backed, shoulders squared, arms loose at his sides. His armor wasn't ceremonial, it was battered, scarred, real. There was no mistaking the authority in the way people stepped aside, or the quiet weight he carried with each footfall. He looked like a man who had bled on foreign soil and had buried the names of both enemies and brothers. He smelled of dust and power, of battles fought and won, but not forgotten. When I stepped into his path, he didn't blink, didn't falter, just stopped, as if he had anticipated this moment for years and was simply waiting for it to arrive. His eyes flicked to mine, sharp, assessing, devoid of warmth but full of clarity. "Li Wei," he said, and it wasn't a greeting. It was a question, one he didn't yet believe the answer to. "Brother, I wish to speak with you," I replied, bowing just enough. A silence fell between us, long, heavy, measured. Then he nodded. Not eagerly, not gently, just once, like a decision made and filed away. "Follow me." We walked through the barracks without a word. Our footsteps echoed like heartbeats in an empty chest. The halls narrowed as we passed into the older wing, stone corridors lit by flickering sconces, walls lined with faded banners from past campaigns. He moved with the same precision he had in the training yard. I followed, unsteady but determined. He brought me to his quarters. It was not what I expected. No gold, no silk, no softness, just a cot, a weapons rack, a table with maps stacked like unspoken memories. A single brazier burned in the corner, casting flickering light across the room. It smelled of ash and resolve. He gestured for me to sit. I did. He didn't offer tea. He didn't sit. Not at first. I studied him as he stood by the brazier. His jaw was tight. His hands, clasped behind his back, bore calluses too old for court life. His silence wasn't hesitation, it was discipline. A sword in its sheath. Finally, he sat across from me. I didn't wait for him to speak. I know we haven't spoken in years, and I doubt you remember me as anything more than a shadow trailing behind the Empress. But I remember you. I began, voice low but steady. Still silence. You were always watching, always there, even when no one else was. And I don't think I realized it then. But now I'm tired, Legion. Tired of masks, of duty wrapped in poison, of smiling at daggers and pretending I don't bleed. I drew in a breath. His expression didn't change, but something in the room did. The air pulled tighter. I don't want a crown. I don't want the games. I just want one person I can trust. Someone who won't twist my words into a noose. His gaze didn't flinch, but it pressed. I know you don't owe me anything, but if there's anyone in this place I could stand beside, truly stand beside, it's you. I continued. He was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. Then he did. His voice was like gravel, rough with disuse, but clean. You're asking for something dangerous. I know. You say you want no power, but proximity to me is power. And loyalty. He paused, eyes narrowing slightly. Loyalty marks. It brands. And it scars. Then mark me, let it scar. I won't bend. For the rest of my life. I said. The brazier cracked, sending sparks dancing between us. For a breath, neither of us moved. Then he leaned forward. His eyes didn't soften, but something behind them changed, like ice shifting on the surface of deep water. Then stand where others have fallen. He rose, and this time when he looked at me he saw not a sibling, not a court pawn, but a sword he might one day trust to guard his back. And for the first time in 2 lives I wasn't alone. Chapter 8. The smile returns. The lotus courtyard hadn't changed. Stillness clung to it like breath on glass. The air was thick with the perfume of old water and slow decay, the last days of summer stretching long and fragile. Pale petals drifted across the pond's surface, ghosts of blooms long past their prime. Koi moved beneath them, silent glimmers of red and gold, vanishing between lily stems like secrets choosing to stay hidden. This place had once been a sanctuary. When I was younger, I came here to dream, to read, to forget the weight of names and duty. Now, I stood at its edge like a stranger wearing a familiar face. The wind didn't greet me. The pond didn't answer. Everything waited. And so did I. I felt him before I heard him. Jihang. His presence moved like perfume through the air. Sweet, cloying, too carefully composed. The sound of his footfalls was deliberate, designed for attention but soft enough to pretend it wasn't. That same scent, honeyed plum and something colder beneath. It used to make my pulse flutter. Now it made my spine stiffen. When he spoke, it wasn't a greeting. It was a performance. My prince, you seem distracted. He murmured, voice rich as velvet poured over ice. I turned, slowly, letting the sunlight catch the edge of my cheekbone, the curve of my mouth, just enough to stir memory in him. Let him remember softness. Let him think I hadn't changed. His smile bloomed, easy, practiced, devastating. The smile that once undid me. I mirrored it, almost, just enough to feed the illusion, just enough to keep him blind. I've been thinking some things may shift because of Li Jun's return. He came earlier this time. I said, voice low, composed. That blink small, quick, But there. What do you mean? I tilted my head, the way he liked. The way I knew he still expected me to. Nothing. Just useless thoughts. I replied, breath light as silk. He stepped closer, brushing invisible dust from the sleeve of my robe. His fingers lingered, deliberate, too casual to be innocent. It was a move rehearsed to the edge of affection but sharpened by ambition. I missed our walks. Missed your company. You always saw the world differently. So gentle, so rare. He said, with that low note of nostalgia in his throat. His voice tried to cradle me. I let it. I lowered my gaze, pretended to fumble under the weight of his flattery. Let a blush rise where he expected it. Peered up through my lashes like I was unsure. Like I had something worth hiding. You say too much, I whispered. But I didn't break. Not this time. In my mind, I counted every move, every word, every inflection. The way he angled his body to keep me between himself and the sun. The way his thumb had brushed where my pulse used to race. The way his eyes never left mine for too long, hunting for cracks in the marble. Ji-hung was never in love. He never had been. Love was too wild a thing for him, too uncontrollable. What he wanted was influence, access, leverage. And I had once given him all three wrapped in silk and trust. Not anymore. Now I gave him what he wanted to see. A soft voice, a hesitant smile, a gaze that darted shyly from his. A ghost of the prince he once seduced. Let him believe. Let him build the illusion high enough that the fall would break every bone. Then something shifted. From across the courtyard, I felt it before I saw it. A tension in the air. A cut through the calm. Lesion. He stood beneath the shade of a pavilion column, arms crossed, armor catching the light like drawn steel. He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched. His expression unreadable, but his presence sharp enough to draw blood. He saw everything, and did nothing, at least not here. That night, when I returned to my chambers, the candles were already lit. The air smelled of wax and steel. Li Jun stood by the window, the moon at his back. The light caught the edge of his armor, turning it silver and sharp. His silhouette looked like something carved by judgment itself. You were with Ji-hung, he said. Not a question. A verdict. I closed the door behind me without looking away. Yes. Why? His voice was flat, but the way his hands curled slightly at his sides betrayed him. I stepped forward, slow, controlled. He approached me, and I'm letting him think he's winning, I said. Li Jun's jaw clenched. His breath deepened, the sound of it rough against the silence. You let him touch you. It's an act. He thinks I'm falling for him. That's how he'll slip. That's when I'll strike. I replied. The words came easily. Too easily. But they scraped something raw on their way out. Li Jun moved then. Just a step, but it cracked the tension like thunder. His voice dropped, low and dangerous. You're playing a dangerous game. I know. I met his gaze, open, firm, unflinching. But I'll show you. Not now. Soon. When the time is right, I'll drag him into the light. I know he's plotting something, and the only way to reach the heart of it is to let him think he already owns mine. My voice softened just a touch. Not pleading. Just truth stripped bare. But it's all right. I have you to protect me. His eyes darkened. Shadows stirred behind them. Fear, fury. Something quieter and more fragile. Something he hadn't named yet. He looked at me like I was something delicate wrapped in glass and fire. Like he didn't know whether to guard me or lock me away. And then he turned back to the window, fists tight at his sides. But he didn't leave. He stayed. And in that stillness I saw it. The thing neither of us had said aloud. The thing that hovered between every glance, every breath. This wasn't just about vengeance. Not for him. Not anymore. There was something possessive in the way he looked at me. Something that clawed at his restraint when Ji-hung stood too close. He didn't know how to name it. Maybe he couldn't. But I did. He was afraid. Not for the plan. Not even for me. He was afraid of what it meant. That this was no longer just war. It was feeling. It was fire. And I was waiting. for the day he would stop pretending not to burn. Chapter 9. The Architects. A year passed, not in fire, not in fury, but in quiet, in stillness thick as honey, in measured glances and well-timed silences, in the slow, careful burial of the boy I used to be. Time didn't heal me, carved me, bit by bit. It stripped away softness, sentiment, and doubt. What remained was something leaner, colder, a blade forged not from hatred, but from precision. My patience became a weapon sharper than any dagger, more enduring than rage, and far more dangerous than vengeance. I learned how to disappear while standing in full view. Meekness became my camouflage. I wore it like silk, soft to the touch, easily dismissed, but threaded with steel. My voice cracked at the right moments. My eyes shimmered with just enough hurt to draw sympathy. I bowed when the moment called for deference. I laughed lightly when Ji-hung teased, tilting my head just so, like it still delighted me, like he still mattered. Let him believe I hadn't changed. Let him cling to the ghost of Li Wei, the gentle shadow who once adored him, who trusted too easily and feared too deeply. But that boy was gone, burned away in the crucible of betrayal. Now every conversation was a chess move, every smile a wire pulled tighter, every word a weight placed on the scales, calibrated to push Ji-hung off balance. He didn't notice. He thought he was pulling strings, but I was the one knotting the rope. One evening, as we walked beneath the plum blossoms in full, deliberate bloom, I murmured, "The Western garrisons are stretched thin. General 1 is restless. Too many soldiers and not enough orders. If someone whispers the wrong word, they'll splinter." I said it like an afterthought, just loud enough for the passing servant to hear. One known for his fondness for rice wine and gossip. 3 days later, Ji-hung repeated the line in court, word for word. He wore it like a jewel on his tongue, dressing it up as his own insight. He called it a strategic concern, a stroke of foresight. He even adjusted his voice to sound weighty, aged, statesmanlike. The emperor nodded in approval. Ministers scribbled notes. Murmurs of respect followed. And Ji-hung turned to glance at me, eyes glinting with triumph, mistaking my quiet for pride in him. Perfect. Let him think he was feeding from me, stealing crumbs of statecraft, leeching wisdom through proximity. What he didn't realize was that the table was mine. The crumbs were laced with poison, and the room was full of traps. But the court didn't see it. Only Li Jin did. In the shadows of the war chamber, lit by fire, ink, and silence, we shed our masks. No courtiers, no politics, just two architects drafting the slow collapse of an empire's favorite lie. We stood over a map the size of a coffin. Thin red threads stretched from province to province, each pinned intersection a pulse point, a potential weakness. Borders were marked like bruises, forts like scabs. Li Jin didn't speak when I entered. He rarely did. He was already there, still as a statue, eyes burning over the eastern trade routes. His hands rested behind his back, posture unflinching, focus absolute. His silence didn't ask for attention, commanded it. I stepped beside him, my voice the only sound in the chamber. "He thinks he's siphoning secrets. Let him," I said. Only then did Li Jin turn to me, slowly, deliberately. His eyes cut through me like a scalpel. Not cruel, not cold, just precise. "And when he bites too deep?" he asked. I didn't flinch. "We snap his neck. No flourish, no hesitation, just the truth. Clean, surgical." He studied me in that way of his measuring weight, intent, resolve. I didn't look away, didn't blink. He didn't need to ask if I meant it. He knew. His arms folded across his chest, jaw tightening as he spoke again. "The envoy from the Northern Court arrives next week. Ji-hung has been pressing for a private audience. Let him have it. We'll bait the hook with something subtle. A new shipment of grain. A supposed weakness in the river fortifications. Something irresistible," I said. Li Jin nodded once. That was all we needed. Our eyes met across the table, my gaze burning with quiet resolve, his like tempered iron, forged and unbending. We didn't need promises. We moved in sync now, fire and frost, storm and silence. We were not rebels. We were not traitors. We were architects of strategy, of downfall, of absolute control. Together we wove narratives the court never saw, moved pieces the ministers never noticed. We crafted illusions with such precision. Even those closest to Ji Hung believed in them. He had no idea. He thought he was playing a game of politics. He didn't realize he was already standing on a trapdoor. Every secret he thought he uncovered, we had planted. Every advantage he claimed, we had let him have. Every ally he believed he'd won, we had already turned. In time, when the weight was right, when his pride was high enough and the floor thin enough, he would fall. And when he did, it would not be with noise. It would be with silence. The kind of silence that follows architects who build empires, not of hope, but of consequence. And Ji Hung, so clever, so careful, so endlessly certain, never once looked down long enough to see the floor crumbling beneath him. Chapter 10, The Trap. It began with ink, not with swords, not with poison, just a brush, a blank scroll, and the right lie told beautifully. There is a particular elegance in a forged truth, the kind that slips past suspicion, that echoes just enough of reality to be trusted. That is the sort of weapon no one sees until it's already in their veins. I sat at my writing desk, posture loose, almost lazy. The brush was held between two fingers as if I were sketching poetry or composing a letter to a lover. But every stroke was a strike. Every curve of the character, a silent blow. The handwriting wasn't mine. Not exactly. It was his, the imperial strategist. The man who breathed smoke and policy, whose fingers shook not from fear but from calculation. I had studied his penmanship for months, memorized it. I knew how his script leaned forward when he was rushing, how the pressure on his brush faltered when he lied. I knew where he let the ink pool, where he cut corners. I knew him better than he knew himself. And so, with the soft scrape of brush on parchment, I became him. The message was simple. On the surface, a standard supply report, an innocuous document regarding troop movements and rations, the sort of thing a tired court minister would skim before handing off to a scribe. But beneath the surface, buried like glass in snow, was the blade. A single paragraph, almost casual, suggesting unrest at the western border. A note about General Wen's troops growing thin. A hypothetical scenario about how the fortifications might fail if faced with pressure from multiple fronts. A whisper dressed as a report. An invitation dressed as oversight. And I knew exactly who it would call to. I folded the scroll once, creased it gently, just enough to suggest handling, not wear, and left it on the corner of my desk. Slanted, exposed, tempting. Then I rang for tea, because some traps don't need bait. They need performance. And Ji Hung loved a stage. He arrived late. As always, it was never about time for Ji Hung. It was about timing. He liked to be noticed walking in. Liked the slow shift of gazes, the quiet ripple of curiosity. He liked being anticipated and feared. "Your Highness," he said smoothly, his voice wrapped in velvet and venom, as he stepped into the chamber. He crossed the room in languid strides, eyes flicking over every corner, out of habit, out of pride. Then they landed, exactly where I wanted them to, the scroll, unattended, half open, suspiciously innocent. "Sensitive documents?" he asked, nodding toward it, tone featherlight. "A tease, a test." I blinked, let hesitation flit across my expression. Bit my lip, just slightly. Turned my body like I was shielding something I didn't understand. "Oh, just something the War Council passed along. Honestly, it's all too complex for me. I tried to read it, but I don't have the mind for strategy." I murmured. A smile touched my lips. Naive, decorative. He loved when I made myself small. The bait hung in the air like perfume. Ji Hung picked up his teacup but didn't drink. He never drank right away. He liked the ritual of withholding, the illusion of control. But his eyes never left the scroll. I didn't need to look again. I already knew he had taken the bait. And in that moment he believed he was clever, that he had outwitted me, that I had, by accident or affection, left him something dangerous and useful. Let him believe. Let him savor it. 2 nights later he made his move, and I followed, silently, patiently, like a shadow with a vendetta. The garden of whispering pines lay beyond the palace's outer edge, older than the stone it was built upon. The willows here bent low, their branches like fingers tracing the earth. Mist clung to the moss-slicked stones. The air smelled of damp secrets and rot. This was where whispers were born, and where they were buried. Ji-hung arrived cloaked in black. No guards, no lantern, just himself, confident, certain, arrogant. He moved with the precision of someone who believed he had control of the board. He met the envoy beneath the oldest pine. Its roots curled up from the earth like bones trying to breathe. A single whisper passed between them. The border is weakening. General Wen won't hold if pressured from 2 fronts, Ji-hung said. And then, with the flair of someone delivering a death sentence disguised as a gift, he handed over the scroll. The envoy took it with bowed head, no questions asked, then disappeared into the fog like a dream vanishing at dawn. Ji-hung turned, confident, unaware. He didn't see the figure behind him, didn't feel the slight lift of fingers at his sleeve, didn't hear the whisper of parchment sliding from his coat. He never even knew it was gone. But I had it. The scroll returned to its master the moment Ji-hung left the garden. The lie retrieved, the evidence secured, the trap complete. Because what Ji-hung didn't know, what he never suspected, was that the envoy he trusted was not foreign at all. He was Li Jin's man, trained in silence, cloaked in shadows, a blade folded so many times it could slip between ribs and be gone before the victim knew he was bleeding. I watched from beyond the trees, heart steady, breath calm, no tremor, no triumph, just purpose. Because this wasn't about catching Ji-hung in a lie. This was about documenting the moment he betrayed the empire. A performance so smooth he would never realize it was being recorded. The scroll he handed over had been traced, copied, sealed, waiting for the right moment to be presented to the emperor. Not as rumor, not as suspicion, but as truth. I returned to my chamber, the scroll in my hand, the scent of pine still in my lungs. Ji-hung believed he had made his first strike. He didn't realize he had just written his confession. He wanted to play games, but I had rewritten the rules. The noose was tightening, and Ji-hung, so smug, so certain, so proud of the stage he thought he stood upon, had no idea the floorboards beneath him were hollowed out, cracked, and soaked in oil. All it would take now was a single spark. Chapter 11, The Hall of Harmony. The Hall of Harmony had never known peace. Its name was a lie, a ceremonial mask stretched over stone walls that had witnessed too many betrayals to remember, soaked in the echoes of bargaining voices and veiled threats. It was harmony only in the way a blade held steady before it fell. The kind of harmony born not of accord, but control. That night, the hall felt more like a tomb, cold, silent, watching. The great incense burners smoked with perfumed coils, but the air refused to be sweetened. The painted dragons on the pillars seemed to curl tighter in the dim candlelight, coiled like they were waiting to strike. I stood before the doors in my plainest robes. No jewelry, no embroidery, no title, just a whisper of who I had once been. My hands were clasped tightly in front of me, fingers white at the knuckles. Not with fear, with precision. I must speak with His Majesty, alone. I have something to confess, I said, voice low, eyes downcast. The tremble in my voice was measured, just enough to stir concern, just enough to feel like a wound reopened, not a blade sharpened. The guards hesitated, shifted, but paranoia had wrapped its fingers so tightly around the emperor's neck that even the faintest whisper of treason would turn the lock. They let me pass. The chamber swallowed me in silence. The emperor sat slumped on the dragon throne, a figure carved from fatigue and dread. His skin had faded to the color of old wax, translucent, sunken, sickly. His eyes flickered like dying flame, restless and half-lost. Power still clung to him, but it no longer belonged. It haunted him. I walked slowly to the center of the hall and dropped to my knees. The stone was colder than I remembered. I bowed low. My forehead kissed the floor. I was careless, and I fear my actions may have endangered the realm, I said. My voice was barely a breath. His fingers twitched against the armrest. "What actions?" he rasped, a serpent's whisper. But before the words could finish leaving his mouth, the doors behind me burst open. Ji-hung exploded into the chamber like fire breaking through wood. Robed in half-dress, silk twisted, hair undone, eyes wild. "Don't believe him. He's twisting everything. He's trying to frame me," he shouted. It wasn't a denial. It was desperation. He charged forward like a man chasing the edge of his own grave. The emperor jolted upright, startled and unsteady. Guards stepped forward on instinct, but hesitated. This was Ji-hung, the favored advisor, the whisperer behind the throne, the man too clever to lose control. Until now. And I said nothing, because I didn't need to. The final piece was already moving. Footsteps echoed behind Ji-hung, calm, clean, deliberate, like the sound of judgment arriving. Li Jin entered in black and silver, the light catching on the edges of his armor like lightning waiting to strike. He did not bow. He did not ask permission. He walked straight to the dais and let the scroll fall at the emperor's feet. The sound it made was soft, barely audible, but it cracked the tension in the room like a stone hitting glass. "Signed by Ji-heng's own hand. Read it," Li Jin said. His voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. Cut clean through Ji-heng's shrieking panic. The emperor's hands shook as he picked up the scroll. Each breath he drew was a struggle. His fingers fumbled with the ribbon. His lips moved as he read, soundlessly, like he couldn't believe what was before him. Each word was a nail, and Ji-heng's face turned to ash. "That's not. This is forged. This is a setup. He's lying. This is treason," he stammered. But the hall had already begun to shift. Ministers leaned forward in their seats. Advisors exchanged whispers that fluttered like ghosts. Servants froze mid-breath. The air thickened with the weight of truth, or something close enough to it. And then the emperor looked at me, not with anger, not with rage, with fear. Real, human, trembling fear. "You," he whispered. "All of you." He rose, stumbled back a step. His foot slipped on his own robes. He clutched the edge of the throne. And then, he fell. Silence. Stillness. No one moved. But I saw it. The faint foam at the edge of his lips. The spasms starting in his hand. The final shudder of lungs that would never draw air again. The poison had been gentle, elegant, delayed. Not by my hand. But I had whispered which hand should do it. Who could be turned. Which cup to serve from. Which moment to choose. Paranoia had poured the drink. Pride made him swallow it. And in the end, fear, his most loyal companion, was what killed him. I stood. The hem of my robe barely brushed the floor. Behind me, Ji-hung was screaming, pleading, clawing at the unraveling threads of power he had once spun so easily. But no one listened. No one believed him. Li Jin turned to face the court, gaze sweeping the room with the finality of a sword leaving its sheath. No orders were given, but the guards moved. Ji-hung was seized, silenced, and the ministers, once so loyal, so loud, lowered their heads. The trap had sprung, and the game was over. Chapter 12, The Fall. The throne room emptied like the sea pulling back before a final wave. Ministers filed out in silence, eyes averted, boots whispering against the marble as if afraid to draw attention. No one looked at Ji-hung. Not directly. They left him there, crumpled, kneeling before the dais where power had once flickered like flame between his fingers. His robes were torn, soaked with sweat and shame. Iron shackles dug into his wrists, thin trails of blood snaking down to the floor. He no longer screamed, no longer begged. His voice had collapsed beneath the weight of panic, pride, and realization. I stood above him, and I said nothing. Not at first. I let the moment stretch, breathless and cold, until the silence around us grew suffocating. The same silence that had once crushed me in my cell, in my final hours, in my final life. Let him feel it. Let him drown in it. Ji-hung lifted his head with effort, eyes bloodshot, mouth dry. He looked less like a prince and more like a man flayed open by his own ambition. Why? I thought you loved me. You were playing me. All this time. You were just pretending. He rasped, voice cracked beyond recognition. I crouched to his level, slowly, knees bending until our eyes met. His were glassy, red-rimmed, and wide with disbelief. Mine were steady. I never betrayed you, you betrayed me the moment you saw me as a tool. A soft little prince you could seduce for secrets. A pawn too stupid to notice he was being used. I said, voice calm and low. I tilted my head, lips curving into something colder than a smile. But I noticed. Ji-hung flinched. You were so sure I'd stay blind. So sure I'd forgive. You thought I'd always be the one looking up at you. He blinked rapidly, then laughed. Broken, hoarse. You knew? All this time? You're not that smart. You couldn't have done this alone. It's him, isn't it? Li-shan. He's the one pulling the strings. I stood, slow and deliberate, like a sword unsheathing itself. Think whatever you want. It's already too late, I said. Ji-heng's gaze dropped. You paved your own path. Don't waste your last breath blaming others. I added. Behind me, I heard the echo of footsteps. Steady, unhurried. The calm before judgment. Li-shan. He stopped beside me, silent as stone. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. He's yours. Do what justice demands. I said quietly. Ji-hung didn't respond. He had no more words. No more fight. The man who once whispered verses into my hands now knelt in silence, stripped bare by the weight of his own failure. It was the only mercy he'd be shown. And mercy tonight was silence. Chapter 13. The Crown and the Bond. The skies rumbled the morning Li-shan was crowned. Thunder rolled across the horizon. Not warning, but witness. Not omen, but echo. In the palace, gold banners unfurled like tongues of fire. Drums beat slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat being rewritten. The scent of sandalwood and ash clung to the air, thick enough to choke on. I stood beneath the high arches of the grand hall, where power had always lived like a dragon sleeping with one eye open. Now it was wide awake. The dragon throne loomed at the far end, ancient, unyielding, carved from lacquered wood and sharp memory. Its armrests were claws. Its back, a spine of flame. No one ever truly sat on it. They survived it. Nobles lined the walls, wrapped in silk, draped in silence. They bowed their heads. They kept their thoughts hidden. Even the ones who once whispered against me now folded themselves like paper. Soft, silent, afraid. Ji-hung was gone, buried under scandal, stripped of name, forgotten like a nightmare that lingered just long enough to stain the morning. And now only two remained at the center of the storm. Li-shan stepped forward. He wore no crown. Not yet. Just ceremonial armor black as obsidian, its edges traced with silver like the edge of a sword. He carried the imperial crown in both hands. He did not bow to the heavens. He did not speak to the ancestors. He turned to me and offered his hand. There was no speech, no explanation, only that gesture, solid, steady, undeniable. I stood at the base of the dais, heart quiet, not still, not numb, just quiet. Each step I took up that throne was a shedding. Of the boy who once bled poems into silence. Of the prisoner who knelt in chains. Of the fool who mistook hunger for love. I took Li-shan's hand. His grip was firm, grounding, and that's when the silence cracked. Gasps fluttered like startled birds. Some nobles leaned forward in disbelief. Others recoiled. A few dropped to their knees immediately, unwilling to test the sword behind Li-shan's calm. No proclamation followed. None was needed. The court had seen enough theater. This was truth now. This was the new empire. Not built on tradition but transformation. not ruled by legacy but by loyalty, not born of law but forged in fire between sword and strategist. Between us. Chapter 14. The Emperor and His Consort. That evening, I entered my chambers and froze. The light was low, candles burning down to half their height, casting amber against the polished floor. But it wasn't the glow that stopped me. It was the robes, laid out with care on the redwood stand, folded with reverence, silk as pale as starlight, embroidered in gold thread so fine it shimmered with every breath of air. Phoenixes, woven in flight across the fabric. Regal, eternal, the kind of robes only ever worn by an empress. My throat tightened. I took one step forward. My fingers hovered over the collar, brushing the embroidery like it might dissolve under my touch. I had never worn anything like this, not in either life, not even in dreams. And then a knock. I turned. Come in. The door creaked softly as Li Jin entered. No crown, no sword, just him, bare of armor, bare of walls. He saw the robes. Then he saw me. There for you, he said. I blinked. You? You're making me your empress? He stepped closer, slow, sure. I'm asking. I won't make you anything you don't want to be. The quiet between us deepened. Not tension, not fear, just the kind of silence where truths gather, waiting. I looked down at the robes again, then up at him. You're serious? Li Jin nodded. I've never been more. He took my hand. You fought beside me. You risked more than anyone. You didn't just want my loyalty, you pushed me to rise. I stand here now, the Emperor, because of you. His voice caught just slightly, but he held steady. And through it all, through every lie, every battle, I was falling for you. And now I know it. I love you, Li Wei, and I don't want anyone else beside me. Not as a symbol, not as a secret, but as the moon to this empire's sky. It wasn't a declaration. It was a vow. My breath hitched. No calculation. No angle. Just that, I love you. I swallowed hard. To tell you the truth, I knew. His brow lifted. There was always something in the way you looked at me. It was more than duty, more than brotherhood. But I thought you'd never say it. I whispered. I was afraid you'd walk away. I stepped into his arms. Then you don't know me as well as I thought, yes. I'll be yours, empress or not, I said. And then he kissed me. Not like conquest, not like victory, like a man who had found the one thing worth kneeling for. We didn't rush. The world beyond the chamber slipped away. The city outside quieted under stars. Power, war, politics all left at the door. Later, the phoenix robes lay untouched, forgotten. Silk sheets twisted around us. His breath on my neck. My name on his lips. Two bodies where once there had only been two weapons pointed at fate. And when the last candle flickered out, the empire belonged to us. Not just by title, not just by blood, but by choice, by bond, by fire, by love.